have with me Magda Wierzycka. I'm pronouncing that correctly, do I, Magda?
Wierzycka, yeah.
She is currently the executive chairperson of Sygnia, and that was until very, very recently. It was quite a surprise for people, Magda.
I have no idea why. I own just under 64% of the company. So if I was going to step down and migrate from a position of CEO, obviously I need to look after my investment. So it was a natural progression to move into a chairman position. I think newspapers made a lot more out of it than it deserved.
Okay. Well, newspapers like to do that, don't they?
Indeed.
Well, Magda is with me as part of the series talking about the upcoming elections and in October this year, the municipal elections. And we're going to focus specifically on corruption, because Magda, you are very well known in South Africa as someone who doesn't keep quiet when it comes to corruption.
There's so much of it.
Magda, we have seen over the past couple of years since the state capture scandal broke, we have become used to the Guptas and certain government officials, ministers and directors of state departments being involved in everything that is corrupt to the T. But there's a specific point of corruption that haven't been discussed as much, or didn't receive as much media attention, at least. And that is corporate corruption, because it couldn't have just been the Guptas taking us for a ride.
No, so look, I have always said, and in everything I have said, that, when it comes to corruption, there is the payor and the payee. And so, the people who accept the money and the people who pay the bribes. And in the context of state capture, and the corruption that we have seen, the level of corruption that's coming out now, the smaller level corruption, so not the billions, the 150 million Department of Health, you are seeing, smaller individuals involved. But when it came to, or individuals involved rather than corporates, but when it came to state capture corruption, the companies that paid were some of the world's largest multinationals, and who collaborated. So from your KPMGs, your SEP, your McKinsey, your Bain, those were multinational companies which came into a developing markets economy, which by its very definition has, a whole lot of inequality, and a whole lot of people who didn't have money are suddenly exposed to what in rand terms is big amounts of money, actually in dollar terms, not so much. And so they accepted the bribes, but more importantly, those multinationals paid the bribes. And, banks, Bank of Baroda, HSBC, laundered the money out of South Africa. And, what's interesting about that for me is, the fact that you can safely assume that it happens all around the world. In fact, I did give testimony in front of the Standard Commission about my conversations with the non-executive director of SEP, who called me and said, well, they pay middlemen all around the world. Why should Guptas have been any different? But what I find interesting about that kind of corporate corruption that participated in state capture is that when it came to multinationals, no international jurisdiction where these companies are headquartered has held their own companies to account for paying bribes. At least we have Zondo airing all the stuff out. What happened to KPMG in Netherlands? What happened to McKinsey in the US? Nothing, absolutely nothing. Now, the corporate corruption in the context of facilitating your state capture or government corruption, well, it's always there, because by definition, who benefits from legislature, who benefits from contracts and tenders? It's invariably the private sector. So you cannot have public sector corruption without private sector corruption. It's almost impossible.
So if you have to measure the South African corporate world in terms of state capture, in terms of corruption, how sick or how healthy are we?
Look, it's an interesting question, because I actually don't think that's necessarily a relative game. There are a lot of countries in the world. In fact, I will struggle to find countries where there is no corruption. So perhaps New Zealand, Canada, so-so, but find the countries where there isn't corruption at government level. It almost doesn't exist. When you have politicians in power with access to power, they will use it to their own personal benefit, people being people. The more important narrative is, why do certain countries, or most countries, a lot of countries thrive despite corruption? And why do certain countries like South Africa don't? And, the difference is that you look at, a country like China. There you have corruption at the top tier, private sector, public sector participating, but you also have a smart government which recognizes that in order to have, not to have uprisings in the street, they also have to take care of their people, of education, of infrastructure, so they have a functioning corruption. So there's a tier of corruption, but at the same time, they make sure that the economy functions. What we've seen in South Africa, unfortunately, is we've seen an example of dysfunctional corruption. So that is where people were so busy stealing, they didn't care what happened to Eskom infrastructure, water infrastructure, road infrastructure. They were just so focused on stealing, singularly focused on stealing. And that, is a much bigger issue. And that's where, I think South Africa, but South Africa is not unique. That's the pot of countries we fall into. We fall into dysfunctional corruption countries, which obviously is a great pity, given the potential South Africa had.
You make me think now of a series that I watched. I don't know if you have seen it, Boardwalk, that is about a congressman who's a bootlegger in the early days of America. And when he convinces the Senate that there should be a road built to his town, he gives the contract to a friend of his. So it's corrupt, but the road gets built, which doesn't happen in South Africa.
Exactly. So we get Nkandla, or alternatively, the money just dissipates and leaves the borders of South Africa in one way or another. And it doesn't get spent. Department of Health, the latest example of 150 million rand wasted on absolutely nothing other than sheer theft. So that's what I find most problematic.
Verkeersboetes behels meer as 'n klein ongerief met minimale gevolge. Jy kan 'n kriminele rekord kry of probleme teekom as jy jou rybewys of motorlisensie hernie en die metropolisie kan jou by padblokkades lastigval om die boetes te betaal. Fines for You verminder moeite met verkeersboetes deur hul te monitor en vinnig, wetlik en effektief af te handel sodat jy nie die ongewenste gevolge hoef te dra nie. Ons spesialiseer in groot vlote en streef daarna om jou geld te bespaar. Kontak ons gerus op 011 867 7331 of besoek ons webtuiste by www.finesforyou.co.za.
Where do the money go?
Well, depending on who you are. So in cases of Guptas, who were, basically were money launderers and came from a family of money launderers in India, the money left the shores of South Africa. It went, we do know, and the papers have been written, academic papers, where the money went. The money went to banks in UAE, in Hong Kong. From there, the money was immediately distributed to multiple bank accounts, multiple bank accounts disappeared. Once it disappeared into these multiple bank accounts, obviously gets spent on lavish lifestyles. In South Africa, and I think what I'm finding so annoying is that actually the South African part of this equation, you can't think, you really can't look at this and not think that we've been robbed by morons, which, so first of all, they're still in South Africa. Second of all, they're taking the money and they're spending it on houses, luxury clothes, luxury vehicles, holidays, and then they're posting it on social pages. So we truly have been robbed by morons. At least if you have people who have bought second passports to Cyprus, and disappeared, and with the money, you would think, okay, it's an organized hit on South Africa. But, to see these people literally on the social pages of the Sunday Times, 2 weeks before they get arrested, when you look at the houses that are being confiscated, and you will see more of it as the asset forfeiture unit really springs into action, as part of NPA. You will see more and more of cars being confiscated, houses being confiscated. People spend it. And that's where it becomes very difficult to look. I don't know what's more difficult to recover. Is it more difficult to confiscate cars, auction them off? You'll never recover the full value of what was stolen. You recover something. The bit where money gets taken overseas and disappears into multiple bank accounts, like with the Guptas, I think that's actually more problematic to recover. But that's where the big money went.
Magda, a good friend of mine who was a parliamentarian earlier, tells me in both previously in the time of apartheid and also now in the new dispensation, and he tells me that a certain company, he always saw the director with the previous president, and when the new dispensation come, that company's director was always with the new president, which makes one want to ask about the relationship between big companies and a government. Is it really necessary, that close relationship between big companies and the current government?
So, it's look, with the current government, someone asked me a more generic question. I was giving a lecture at Columbia Business School, and they said to me, what does it take not to have corruption in government? And I said, well, a good start is to elect a very wealthy president who doesn't need to steal. The bit where you have, private public sector closeness, that's a feature of almost, again, every country. And many of the large companies worldwide are large because they depend on government contracts. So who hands out mega contracts? Sygnia isn't going to hand out a mega contract to anybody for anything. So when it comes to multidisciplined companies in the business of provision of services, and even financial services when it came to the PIC for that matter. But when it comes to big contracts, those big contracts tend to come from the public sector. So the private sector and the companies will always try and stay close to the public sector, so that, when the tenders are there, they have an in, they've got more information, they have lobbied for their particular point of view, because a lot of this staying close, is about lobbying and or marketing, whichever, term you prefer. So I think that's a feature everywhere, if that makes sense. Now, this really goes to the integrity of the politicians to, have strong legislation which prevents, skewing contracts in a particular direction. Look, South Africa has had the strong regulation. It's just we've had a government which didn't comply with regulation. But then what you need is strong sanctions. You know, if that happens, people must go to jail and visibly go to jail. And I'm hoping that that's the period we're entering into, where, you know, fear enters the equation again, because people see consequences to their actions, which I think we haven't seen for quite a long time.
So am I right? Mostly when you see a big business person moving close to a politician, it is in essence going to be corrupt.
It's not in essence going to be corrupt. It's an attempt at lobbying. It's an attempt at, looking in every, so it's not necessarily corruption. You know, in every business contract that you enter into, very often business contracts are about relationships and building relationships, and private sector typically operates on the back of building relationships, which don't have to be financial, incidentally. But in order to protect the taxpayer, you know, what needs to be in place is very strict, very strict rules of engagement, so that even if business stays close to the presidency of, cabinet ministers, it doesn't really matter, because when it comes to the awarding of advertising and awarding of the big tenders, there is a completely arm's length relationship between ministers and, tenderees, so that no particular tender can be skewed in any particular way. Now, again, this is, because the only way this kind of close relationship benefits the business is if they can influence the tender awarding to, towards themselves by virtue of the relationship. So if the relationship actually doesn't influence the award of tender because of legislation, because of Chinese walls, then it's neither here nor there.
On another level, in the same sense, big companies committing to political parties, giving them financial aid. What advantage, benefit is there for a company in supporting, say, a political party like the EFF? What do they get out of that? Or giving money to the ANC?
Look, it's always a bit of a hope and a prayer, to be perfectly honest. And again, it happens worldwide. So, I was told, I kind of split my time between UK and South Africa. And I was told that, because of COVID, this kind of fundraising, political fundraising has been going through quite a tough time in the UK. So for £100,000, I can meet anyone I want to for dinner. So if I make a donation of £100,000 to the Tory party, who do I want to meet for dinner? So parties and political parties fundraise all around the world, from United States, UK, and outside a feature of South Africa. And the reason for fundraising is that the allocations, budgetary allocations that they get out of the taxpayers' pot are usually very small. And then when you look at elections, what do you need? You need marches, you need regalia, you need posters, you need adverts, you need functions where you need buses, you need food for the people you're busing in, so it's huge expenditure thing. And so you need to raise money for that. Now, you do it through fundraising. What do the companies themselves get out of it? The cleverest companies, to be perfectly honest with you, donate money to every party. So they back every horse in the race. So that they are, if there are any crumbs falling off the table, whichever table, they don't actually care which table it is.
It's that table that I'm talking about. Yeah.
So most large companies actually don't care which table it is, and hence they will donate to every single one, and then they hope that gives them access, relationships, preferential information. That's the reason. Look, you do have But usually not at a company level, at individual level. You have people donating because they believe in a cause. So, I'm hardly, as Magda, going to donate to every single political party. I will donate to the party that I believe has the, greatest potential for taking South Africa forward.
Which party?
Yeah, you tell me. Almost like, Iran, you don't know who to vote for at all, so you just don't vote. I don't know. If you said to me, evaluate the merits, I don't find any party in South Africa worthy. So I think it's a real problem.
Why do you say that?
Look, you would have to evaluate each and every party, which obviously I don't want to do, but which party has presented to me with a growth plan for South Africa, which is, because we've got a lot of political parties in South Africa which point fingers at ANC and corruption. And that has almost become their sole slogan and sole reason for existence, is to point out ANC's failures. Now, what I would like to hear is, I would like to hear a fresh voice which says, here is if we were elected. Here are the simple terms, 15 bullet points. This is what we would implement in terms of economic policy, education policy, and this is how much it will cost us, and this is how much we have in the pot, and that's how we would spend it. So give me 15 flashcards as a political party that makes me believe that you've got a vision for the future of South Africa, and then I'll vote for you. Don't give me a 200-page document that I'll never read. 15 flashcards in different colors, preferably, that explain to me in simple terms why I should vote for you. And it better not be because ANC is corrupt. Whereas, our politics have resulted to that.
So even though Erwin Mashaba is very active against corruption, won't make the cut with you because he's also venting against the ANC.
Look, I think he's a credible candidate in, Johannesburg. But again, give me more, I need more to be convinced to vote for a political party than just saying, I'm not going to steal your money. If that's one of your flashcards, I promise not to steal. Please vote for me because I promise not to steal. Come on.
It is funny.
That is what is flashing in front of us. This is what you are asked to vote for.
So that's the level actually that South African politics has gone down to. Is I'm worthy because I don't steal.
Yeah, please select me. One flashcard. It's absurd. It's absurd.
Do you have a future under the ANC?
So, look, my thing of building Sygnia, and I guess, why I can voice my opinion so freely is that, a very long time ago decided not to do business with government. I don't manage any government money. I don't manage any PIC money. I don't even know what PIC offices are. So, I'm not in any way dependent on any government contracts. And that's by choice. I've never tried to solicit money from government pension funds or anything like that. In fact, in my entire career, I've never tried to solicit money from, for instance, the PIC. So when I look at ANC right now, there's some realities of South Africa right now. And that is that ANC definitely has the most widely recognizable brand name. And remember that your votes are coming from rural areas, urban areas, from all sorts of walks in lives. And very often people, if they don't know what to vote for, they will vote for the people with the loudest voice, or the colors they recognize, the slogan they recognize, the logo they recognize. So I think it's naive to suppose that ANC will not remain the largest and the most influential party in South Africa, irrespective of what individuals do, because I think as a mass movement, people will automatically vote ANC in the absence of more widely recognized brand. Now, within ANC itself, my view of the ANC is that, as it stands at the moment, and they very well might in next national elections marginally lose the majority, in which case, they will have to form some kind of a coalition, although I think it's still unlikely. But, for the purposes of, ANC itself, I kind of look at the ANC and I think we are already being governed by a coalition. And the ANC coalition is a coalition of the good ANC and the bad ANC. So there are certain, and deals have been struck. So, what surprised many South Africans, really potentially being corrupt with his 150 million rand tender in the Department of Health, well, I've been told by very senior people in government, very, very senior people, that he's known for that. This is not the first time. So coalitions within ANC have been struck for votes, because, you can never forget that the president of ANC becomes president of the country. He can be recalled as president of ANC at any stage. And that decision is literally made by 85 people. So you've got your 80 people in NEC and additional 6 people in executive, of which he's one. 85 people decide the future of South Africa. So invariably, you have people on the right side of the law and the wrong side of the law. Mm. And that is what's governing us right now. And you're seeing it in a whole lot of compromises that people like Cyril Ramaphosa has to make in order not to ensure that he's not recalled and that a greater evil doesn't happen. And it's happening at every single level of decision making in government. So where you see illogical decisions being made, I always look at it and I go, that's a compromise decision to keep that person on this side of the fence. I think, in kind of municipal elections, because you don't have these kind of, more brand awareness of various parties, what you start getting is a whole lot of fragmentation, and then you get a whole lot of coalitions. And most coalitions, given how polarized South African politics are, land up in a mess of people falling apart, people compromising on which positions, which party holds, and hence the failure of municipalities, which we have seen all around South Africa. So that has not, served us well. This concept of, one big party, whole lot of small parties, polarized politics across the country, and then coalitions left, right, and center. But that's what we have to live with.
Yeah, you play with the cards that you have. Having those cards at hand, what do you see happening in the municipal elections this year?
Fragmented coalitions. That's exactly what I'm seeing. I'm seeing different parties in different regions. I'm seeing kind of regional votes. So I think there will be a lot more polarization because you have, you've got small parties which are concentrating on particular constituencies, very regional constituencies, in terms just because they've got limited marketing budgets. And they might very well get elected on the ticket of I want steel. But, they usually, I don't expect them to get clear majority votes. So then to get to the majority positions, they will need to form coalitions. So I think it will be very fragmented. It is, usually not great.
I'm basically finished, but I'm very curious about the tiff with Elon Musk.
He reacted. So look, Bitcoin is one of, digital assets. It's a digital asset I've been obviously interested in. And, for digital assets to actually have a long-term future as assets, as investable assets. Currencies is a different thing. I think eventually you will end up in a world where every country will have its own digital currency and will control its own digital currency. But if you look at digital assets as investable assets, you have to have some kind of predictability in price movement. And what Elon Musk has done undoubtedly is he's used his profile and his, influence to, I would call it pump and dump schemes. So he's used social media and his influence to manipulate the price of Bitcoin. And you can't do stuff such as, you first under the radar screen buy 1.5 billion US dollars of Bitcoin, then announce to the market that you've done so. So obviously the price of Bitcoin shoots up, but then to push it up even higher, you announce that you're going to accept Bitcoin as tender for buying Tesla cars. Then within a month, reverse your position, then sell some of your holding. And this is where he tweeted saying he only sold 10%. Well, 10%, if you started with 1.5 billion and that 1.5 billion maybe today is 7 or 8 billion and you've sold 10%, it's a hell of a lot of money you've just made out of nothing. And then tweet that, you will no longer accept the price, the Bitcoin for Tesla cars, and that you've sold some of your shareholding at the top.
Someone like Mike Schuster has warned us a couple of years ago already about Bitcoin. What is your opinion about this? He called it the latest Ponzi scheme.
Look, it's not. I don't think it's a Ponzi scheme, but I think it's, I think it's a speculative investment asset. So, when I talk about speculative, which doesn't mean that there isn't a demand for it. So, look at casinos. How many people go to the casinos and are very happy with the concept of playing roulette and playing black or red? Lots. And derive a huge amount of satisfaction from it. So there certainly is, to me, Bitcoin is a little bit of that. You'll invest in Bitcoin, you don't know if it goes up or if it will go down, but you're happy with the experience. And, this is not your long-term saving strategy. And I think there are plenty of youngsters or younger people, maybe younger than my generation, who are using Bitcoin for that and derive, enjoyment from it. And potentially, if they were early in the game, have made some money out of it.
So do you think when it should be better regulated, like most other financial systems?
So I think that there should be more regulation, and the reason why there should be more regulation, or at least there should be formalized investment vehicles which protect you. It is the fact that right now Bitcoin, apart from the being question mark investable asset class, it obviously is also used for illegitimate money exchange. So money laundering, payments for services of dubious nature. So if one could regulate and take it away from that kind of dark net sphere, that definitely would be in the interest of the people who are actually just investing for their own gains and for own pleasure. It would make pricing more visible. It would mean that there's less likelihood of exchanges being cracked and hacked, and money being stolen, or owners of dubious exchanges running away with all the Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
So, when it comes to these kind of novel asset classes where lots of money has piled in, if it was on the fringes, you don't care. But it's no longer on the fringes. It's actually a multi-trillion-dollar industry. So in that space, to have a multi-trillion-dollar industry completely unregulated is ridiculous. You need regulation.
Because as I understand it, when something like this happened, what Elon Musk did, if something like that happened at the JSE or Wall Street, he would have been in big trouble.
Gone to jail. Jordan Belfort of Wolf of Wall Street fame went to jail for exactly that. It's called the pump and dump scheme. And, look, it's a question mark whether, and I think that's why he responded to because I actually gave, a couple of interviews, and that got translated into an article, and, some US website, Twitter account tweeted that article, and that's what he responded to, defending himself. My comment on all of this is that when he drove, and he personally, through his actions, drove the price of Bitcoin, which is currently trading at around $30,000 a Bitcoin, but he drove it up to 60. People bought, youngsters bought, believing in him. And then a lot of youngsters have lost money, which they could not afford to lose, when that price went from 60 to 30, again, based on his actions. So when it comes to losing people's money, there must be accountability. And it's not beyond, the US markets are regulated by SEC, and potentially SEC is looking into this already. I mean, they don't make the investigations public until there are fines involved. Okay. But if not, regulators should be looking into the influence that, people like Elon Musk have on pricing of assets, and on the potential for average man in the street who is ignorant of, potential to lose money purely because of the influence of one individual. Because, there's nothing good about this, by the way. There's no way you can look at this and say there's something ethical or credible about what has happened. To me, it's shocking. And a lot of people have lost money.
Just a last question regarding your being the chairperson of Sygnia now. Do you have a time frame on that, or do you?
No, look, we own. Between myself, my husband, family trust, we own, I think, 63.2% of Sygnia, and I've got absolutely no intention of selling any of our shares. And obviously, it's a big portion of our net worth, which we have created from the ground up. I think, there are very few companies in South Africa where literally it was, there are a few, Aspen, but, where you had few people in the room, and we had no capital backing us. We had to mortgage our houses to start the company, took no salaries for the first 5 years. So Sygnia will always be my baby. And for as long as it is that, then I will remain involved. And as I said, I've got absolutely no intention of selling. I think, Sygnia has a great future. We have, for the first time, this year, started attracting a lot of retail investors to Sygnia. So asset management companies go through an evolution. First, you get pension fund money, then the man in the street starts recognizing your brand and what you stand for and investing with you. And that is what we have seen with Sygnia in the last year, that suddenly the man in the street, the average man in the street, has woken up to what we stand for, which is, low cost transparency, value for money. And we've started to attract, huge volumes of investors moving their assets to us. So I think the future of Sygnia is bright, and I want to be part of that journey for as long as I can.
Thank you very much, Magda Wierzycka, the chairperson of Sygnia. Thank you for making time for Nuuspod.
Absolute pleasure.
Keep well.
Okay, cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Het u al geregistreer by die Departement Militêre Veterane? U kwalifiseer vir voordele soos gratis medies, begrafnisdekking en meer. Gratis hulp met registrasie vir donateurs van die Veterane Bystandfonds. Stuur die naam of magsnommer na 31429.